Daniel, welcome to the Divine Shakti Arts podcast. I'm excited to record in this kind of new format today, and we have our video camera set up here. And it's nice to do the video in person rather than always, via the internet through Zoom or whatnot.
Right.
It's nice to kind of connect and be with the person. So we were feeling to discuss a little bit about sadhana, which is spiritual practice. And for this episode, we were thinking to specifically mention sadhana in relation to work and how work relates to sadhana and perhaps how it helps it and works with it, like how it works hand in hand pretty much. So I think we both have a decent amount of experience with this in the past couple of years.
Yeah,
so I feel like there is some benefit for us to share what we went through and what we're going through. So yeah, and it's been about 4 or 5 years, something like that, since I interviewed you last. So it's just an honor to have you back again. And you've gone through so much in these past 5 years that it's just kind of like I'm speaking to a whole new you in a sense. So looking forward to having you here and sharing everything that you feel to share. I guess we can maybe start out with, perhaps, sadhana as it relates to work and maybe what you have went through in, say, the past 4 or 5 years with what you've learned a little bit about work. And then we could talk about, both of us can share a bit about how it has affected us in our spiritual practice.
Absolutely. Sounds great.
How is what's it been like for you? I think the last we talked, we were, the red dot was probably in its second, third year, something like that, and this is in California. And what has your evolution been like since then, if you can put that into words?
I think it's easiest for me to verbalize that if I sort of walk from what I recall about that point to where we are now. Because I do remember a little bit about that discussion. And I know that at that point I had sort of just come out of this shell shock of basically coming from getting my master's in business, joining the group, and then realizing that not only did I not know the first thing about spirituality or sadhana, I also didn't actually know the first thing about work, and about how to work effectively or meaningfully, or however you want to look at it. And I think that when we had spoken, it was sort of after the first shock of that had passed, and then maybe another year or so had passed, and then it was almost like I was being rebuilt, in many ways through work, to become a better functioning person, to become actually a more, you could say, spiritual person, and to understanding its role, like work's role in my life and in my sadhana. And I think, a lot has happened since then. I know that if I just kind of look at work on its own, the pressure of it has definitely gotten greater. And I think what I mean by that is not only is there more work, but the work is, you could say it's of, like, there's more consequences for mistakes.
Yeah, higher caliber.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, higher caliber work, there's more consequences from mistakes, which are more obviously felt and seen. I feel, in the things that I touch, I feel particularly like responsible for them. That that, and not so much in a sense that like, oh, if I mess up, everybody's going to blame me. And I think that this is actually kind of an important link to make when you look at the link between sadhana and work. But it's more that this is something that's important for a universal purpose, and it impacts others. So that the work is not, it's not important in the point that it's my work. The work's important because it impacts others. And I think as the longer I've been here, that type of work almost feels the most significant to me. Like, of course, everybody in any everyday life, you're going to have a lot of things that you need to do to take care of yourself. Depending on the dynamic of your life, you may need to earn to support yourself. You need to feed yourself every day. You need to dress yourself every day. You need to do the things that make you just to survive. Then the level up for that is how to survive with some kind of a dignity. So dressing yourself well every day, shaving every day, eating right every day. How do you speak to people every day? Then taking that to the next level is, well, what are you doing towards manifestation? And you can look at that as, well, what am I doing even just in a practical manifestation? Like I think the easiest way to look at that is think of somebody that works in construction. What they're manifesting is really obvious, and it's like right in your face.
Yeah.
You build homes, you fix homes, you build things or you fix things. It's visual. You can see it, whether it's quote unquote divine manifestation or just manifestation. It's obvious. But I think regardless of what that is, that plays a role in anything. If you're a bookkeeper, how you are maintaining the books is helping a company manifest truth in its tax returns and be able to pay its bills and understand how much money they have. So that might not be as visual, or not visual, it might not be as visible, but it's still a very important thing. And then, and so on, but then as you get more and more into it, you see that there are impacts on an individual level, and then you'll see that there are impacts on a universal level. So I think that when we last spoke, trying to tie all these points together, I was just kind of learning more about how to manage my own individual work, and the role that it played in my, I would say, individual sadhana. And maybe at some point in the talk, Mukta, you can even explain what you feel is the difference between like an individual sadhana and a universal sadhana. But when I say individual sadhana, it's like the things that I need to do to carry myself as a divine being. So when I first came, I'm not ashamed to say, when I first came to the group, I was not a very disciplined person. I had a lot of really bad habits. I would struggle with things as simple as waking up in the morning, and I was doing work that I had never done before. Washing dishes at the Red Dot. I was coming from finishing this MBA, and that was kind of a big blast to the ego at the time, And I also realized not only was I doing them, I was doing them really poorly. And it was something that I had never, in my experience with work before, I never thought that was something that mattered.
Right.
Like, why do I need to do something well that's not an important part of my life? But if I start to look at it from a little bit more of a universal perspective, if I do the dishes poorly, and let's say Connor, for example, is there closing with me, and he needs to use those dishes to serve food to customers the next day, whether it's something I care about or don't, he's going to have to do the dishes again. And the consciousness that I've put into those dishes, it's having a detrimental effect on so many people. Connor's going to have to do more work. If he doesn't do more work, a customer is going to get served on a dirty dish. So starting to see all these connections, you start to see that, like, whoa, everything that you do has such an impact.
Right.
So I know that, when we had talked in whenever it was 4 or 5 years ago, I think that I was way more focused on just like how work had changed my individual life. Like now I could carry myself more proudly.
Sure.
I felt like a more dignified being. I felt like the tiredness in my physical body, the cloudiness in my mind, they were starting to fade. And I was feeling immense love in my heart just from doing work and learning not to really want something from it exactly.
Yeah.
Meaning like learning not to work for money, meaning not to work with like such a direct result motive.
Right. Yeah.
More learning like these are proper ways to work and these are principles that should go behind work.
Mm-hmm.
And a big focus on learning all of those. And now I think a lot of what's shifted, and of course so much has happened in the last 5 years, but a lot of what's shifted for me, especially in the last year or two, is feeling more so how the work impacts another and how the work is basically a benefiting divine manifestation. And
Right,
there's
yeah.
like a simple way to look at that, and then there's a deeper way to look at that.
Mm-hmm.
A simple way is that everything you do has a domino effect. And it's especially in the way that this group is organized, I really start to see that effect really clearly. And it's not just within the group. I mean, I could say my real estate work
Mm-hmm.
for the community at large, I definitely see it. But I certainly see it in the group. You know, how every decision made has a big impact on somebody else. And sometimes it's direct and sometimes it's indirect. But I see more and more how, like, when something, and this is a big thing that Maiji is trying to teach us, when something is procrastinated, you might not see the impact right away, but the amount of things that are going to be attached to that procrastinated thing, it's staggering, actually, when you look at it, because it touches so many people, both energetically and practically. And just, I'll sort of lay out a scenario here, and one might not think this relates to work, but I almost see that like sadhana is work and work is sadhana. So that every moment of your life you're actually working. But in a sense of that, everything that you do is significant. And you could be working sitting on an airplane, you could be working having a meal, you could be working sitting with your parents.
Right. So you could look at it like yogic action, really.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the form of sadhana.
It's more so about that. But let's just say that we are getting ready for a busy weekend at the Red Dot. And you, me, and Connor, we're all staying at the Palace. And you and Connor say, Daniel, please wake us up at 6 a.m. so that we can get to the Red Dot and get it set up for the day. You help us for 2 hours, and then you can go and do your office work. And let's say that I wake up at 8 a.m. You were relying on me to be your alarm clock. So the three of us get to the Red Dot at 9 a.m. 3 hours behind now, right?
Yeah.
Because I couldn't wake up on time. So if we look at it that way, first of all, that's already 6 man hours of work that we've lost due to my own laziness. Then let's say as soon as we get to the Red Dot, you start getting orders. Prep isn't done. You are having every order to cut something from scratch and struggling. There's no rhythm in the kitchen and everything is taking twice as long as it should. Me, out of guilt, I'm staying at the Red Dot and I'm trying to help. So my office work is now getting behind.
Mm-hmm.
Red Dot orders are not going smoothly. And we might get so stressed out that Hannah, who could be at a real estate showing, we might say, Hannah, we need you to come. As opposed to if we had gotten there at 6 and we were properly prepped out, Hannah would be at her real estate showings, I'd be at the office, and you and Connor would be harmoniously having the nicest morning getting everything ready.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just like a very small scale
the compound
example.
effects,
But this is, and to me, that is actually sadhana. And it's not just about what gets done. That's almost like the very surface thing. But think about what's felt in this scenario, this disharmonious scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Mukta is probably feeling irritation that your whole day is messed up. You can't get the food out to customers right. Nothing is going smoothly. Connor might be he could be feeling foggy because he didn't wake up on time. He could be feeling something similar to what you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I probably feel guilty about the whole thing.
Yeah.
Mama, she might be having this beautiful interaction with the real estate customer that she has to cut short. There's so many different things. And then if we even just think about how we're bringing divine into each action, those little moments of irritation and those moments of imperfection, when you look at divine manifestation, those are all taking us a step away from divine manifestation.
Yeah, it goes into the manifestation. Those feelings, the irritation will go into the food. It won't have the desired effect of spreading that consciousness that you're hoping to be experiencing through sadhana.
Right.
So, yeah.
And that's just the yogic action. I mean, we're just touching, I think that that's even just touching briefly on simple yogic action. Then, of course, you get into much more complex scenarios, and I don't know if this is jumping around too much, but then it gets to something as simple as, well, how do you carry yourself in a scenario? How do you respond when a red dot customer asks you a difficult question about what's used in the food? Do you guys have all the nutritional facts on your dishes listed? And how do you respond to them in a way that both answers their question in a loving way and is truthful if you don't have it, but also doesn't put the business in any kind of an awkward situation and doesn't create any ripples in that person? But the thing is, like, these things, they're so dynamic. It's not, I'm describing it in much longer than it takes for these things to happen.
Yeah.
You know, everything is like this. So it is actually, so now coming back to sadhana, which is important for one's spiritual progression, when one views these things from a spiritual lens, that experience of making the correct decision when a difficult decision comes up, it's not really a mental experience. It's not like you don't have time to spend 4 minutes thinking about, okay,
weighing it out. Yeah.
Here's how this impacts this, and here's how this impacts this. It's by connecting in the heart to the higher aspects of your being, plus all of the knowledge and experience that you've gotten through doing different types of work, that you know how to respond correctly in that scenario. And that's so much of, we've gotten our training from Maiji, we've gotten it from our own experience. And when something happens that's either not good or that is good, you should learn how to either not let that happen again or let that happen again.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm sort of rambling right now, but I think that this is a little bit of like my experience in touching a lot of different ways, but just work is incredibly significant from so many different layers. And for many people, I think, especially for, maybe it's not especially, you can tell me, but I've always been more of like a, I guess, action-oriented person. Spirituality almost came for me after getting interested in work.
Yeah, I was the opposite.
Right, exactly. So they came from other ends. Yeah. But in many ways, like, anything that I've experienced about spirit, in so many ways, has come from what I've learned about how to work. Mm-hmm. Because through work, you can manifest truth. Through work, you can manifest love. And it is, in my opinion, it's one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful way to spread that to others.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, for the person that is listening to this and that's interested in progressing further in their own sadhana and in their own consciousness, and they're thinking about work and how it may relate to their process, there's a couple, I think, just points we can kind of talk about or bring up and that we've experienced. And I feel like just in general, when you're doing work, and it's work, I don't know, it wouldn't necessarily be all work, I would think. It depends really. What really matters is what you're putting into it. What your it could be any work actually, but it more matters what you're putting into it. Say if you're just like you're on a spiritual path, and your day job all day is to like put things in boxes and tape them up and then put them in a truck. Like that, it may seem like, okay, this is a boring thing. How does it relate to my spiritual aspirations? But I think what could take place is that when you package these items in the box, you're doing it with such heart and care, as if like you're trying to, through each box, you're trying to become better inside at executing something with perfection, that it's actually aiding to your inner process. It's making you grow in sadhana. So I think that self striving towards the inner perfection through this outer act is really a huge thing, and which could be any work. And I think it's really important to not separate your spiritual life from your work life. And we have the fortune that there actually is no separation at all, because we're in an environment where the whole thing is set up,
Right.
where it's integrated completely, because we are in a spiritual community, and each aspect of the community, it's helping to manifest spirit. It's helping to manifest a higher consciousness, because everything's kind of within itself, what's in the community. But there's so many people that, they have this spiritual life, and then they have they work for a company that doesn't consider spirituality. So how do you bridge those worlds? And I think it's kind of through that that it will happen. And I think my experience, and I did have the opportunity to work a decent amount before completely the work was integrated in the group. Like, for instance, I did landscaping, and I was still very much aspiring spiritually during that time. I mean, what I was doing was on a lawn, I'd be on each step, like walking on the earth, like it was like I cared for it, and I'd be sometimes like chanting a mantra that I felt was like benefiting me, and just this kind of this act of moving and aspiring, perhaps chanting, perhaps just like walking with intention. It really, I feel, helped kind of integrate, and that's a big thing about work, is that it helps integrate your realizations in your spirituality. So I'm walking and perhaps chanting, and there's a certain like building and integrating the realization into your physical. And I think we can meditate, we can read, which is amazing. We can do a lot of different spiritual practices and realize things, experience things. But so often I think that happens, and we're not able to bridge the gap. It's only kind of limited to certain points of ourselves. Like when we go do work, or we're in the world, shopping, we kind of lose that experience because it's not integrated. We haven't tried to hold the experience while doing something. And I think that's the whole thing with this yogic action and work. It just kind of like bridges those two things, like high loving experiences of love with doing something at the same time. And I think that's probably like the only, it seems as if like the only way for like Earth to really transform is to kind of have those two things work together. We're physical beings, We're here to do things that are in time and in physical form, and so we're not here to just, okay, here's this body, and then I'm having this great experience on like some higher plane, and then okay, the body didn't do anything.
Right.
It's if there's going to be a difference on Earth, I think that both need to like blend, integrate with each other. Good night. All right, so we took a little break and we were served some chai here. So we're gonna enjoy this chai during our talk here. So we were talking about the benefits of work and how people can bridge that gap between the regular life and the spiritual life. And then you started to mention what you went through when you started to do real estate.
Yes. So this was like, for me, it was almost like my first little step out of the bubble, if that makes sense. So, let's just say before I came to Divine Shakti Mandir group, it was whatever it was, 28 years of being in the world, living in the world, working in the world. But at that point, because I hadn't been at least so much consciously in touch with a higher consciousness, I didn't realize in many ways how, I guess for lack of a better way of put it, how unconscious I was, and also how unconscious many people are when they work. And even I could say like the broader intentions that people have behind their works, and how easy it is to fall into almost like an unconscious or unmeaningful way of work. You show up at a job. Even I think many spiritual people have this experience, especially if they're working out of a spiritual context. You show up at a job, you punch in the clock, you do the work because you get paid to do the work, and then you leave. And it's like, what happened to my day? Where did I go during that time period? Where was my consciousness during that time period? And I think that's where it's such a dangerous thing for a person who is on a path or who is trying to do sadhana to try to separate their spiritual life from their work life, because it's at least a third of your life.
Yeah.
And if you're going to say that at least a third of your life you're just getting through the day to get to the rest of your life, that's a massive part of your day. To me, it's a massive hole, to be honest, in your consciousness that you're not trying to fill with something higher. So, I had that experience for many years, and then I came to the group, and I would say the first 2 years or so, I was really in this bubble in a way of like, yes, I was working at the Red Dot, I was doing website work through Sara, but there was nothing that I could say that I was doing so much that I was like in a public eye, and it wasn't really being touched by something surrounding this movement.
Right.
But when I went into real estate and I got my license and I started working with some of the local real estate companies, there were days I'm sitting in an outside office 8-10 hours a day, and Maiji had kind of given me this charge of like, she spoke to me about her experience in real estate and about all the games that are played and all the greed that's in it, and the lying and the cheating and all of that happened, and that it didn't have to be that way. And that one of the reasons that she wanted me to get this license was to try to bring truth and light and love into real estate. And I really connected deeply to that, because buying a house is such a massive decision for people. It's so connected. It's connected to the heart. It's connected to the feeling. It could be a place where somebody will spend the rest of their life, or even the next 10 years of their life. They'll raise their children. They'll retire there. There's so much meaning behind that. And for so many people, that buying process, it's just like, it's brutal. It's a money grab. It's so competitive, and you feel like everybody's on a different side. So I didn't have experience with real estate when I went into this, but I did have I had sort of this, I guess, conceptual or aspirational connection to what real estate could be. And then going into that atmosphere where, just to be blunt, there's a lot of jaded individuals, even in the real estate industry. There's a lot of greedy individuals. There's a lot of dishonest people. But there are also many people that they love what they do. They love helping people buy homes. They want to make it a great experience. But even in how it's spoken about, it's almost like there's a barrier between like a higher dignity in the performing of that work and just the daily almost like social performance of it or financial pressure of it or just like the atmosphere behind it, which is not always the highest atmosphere, even those that have in their heart that they want to do something beautiful. So when I started going into that, I really like went in with this aspiration of like, no matter what, I have to hold myself to this divine standard. I can never forget that I'm here doing sadhana, that I'm here because I want to do some service for mankind. And I could be around, people that aren't consciously thinking that. But that doesn't mean that they can't do it or aren't do it. But aren't doing it. But that was the thing that I wanted to help bring out in others. And especially in the beginning, it was balancing that line with also knowing I didn't have much experience. I didn't have much knowledge. But I couldn't let people walk over me with a way of doing things that was not of this like highest caliber. So in that, at the same time as I'm trying to focus on making this an important part of my sadhana, plus trying to learn how to be just like a good real estate agent, I had to learn discrimination. I had to learn when somebody was trying to take advantage. I had to learn how to respond when all this nastiness would come in, and I might feel like I have to come back. Somebody's coming at me strongly. I have to respond back in a nasty way, but that I didn't really have to do it, and that I could be strong and stand up for my clients in a dignified way by speaking the truth and not just letting it be like the loudest, most powerful voice, but that truth has a power in and of itself, and you just have to have the courage to speak it. And so there were just so many things that I learned, like practically from doing it, but also spiritually, that like it can be hard to speak the truth. It can be hard to admit when you're wrong, especially in the beginning. I made so many mistakes. I made mistakes that impacted people's lives. And as painful as that is in the moment to go through it and know that like, oh man, I made a mistake in this deal and I might have cost this person a house. I don't think that any real estate agent who does it for a long time could say that they never did that. Because from having that experience, you learn what not to do in the future. And experience is the most powerful teacher. But it was just constantly like learning how to both bring things up a higher professional level, but also bring things up a higher spiritual level. And there's just so many layers and layers and layers to that, but it's really, in the end, it's also very simple. How to serve with love, how to serve with dignity, how to bring the utmost intelligence into whatever you're doing. And it becomes, at least for me, it becomes such a dynamic process of just like, it's almost like work is just the convenient word that's used for it. It's just life. Work is just the describing word.
Right.
It's just, are you living in a divine way? And if you're living in an outward way, if you're living in a way that is trying to manifest something, it's most likely going to find its way in work.
In action.
In action.
Yeah. So I think another aspect of the benefit of work for someone on the spiritual path is that being idle. There's a lot of a lot of dangers, I feel, that come when you're not very active. And we could talk about the gunas, like the tamas, rajas, and sattva. When we're not active, it tends to invite more tamasic ways of life, habits, and things like that. And then I think what will happen also, if you're not active, if you're not working for something, then negative thoughts will come in, or negative emotions, negative feelings. And if you don't have your life, I feel like, set up to be like moving in action, it seems like it's more challenging for the person on a spiritual path, because they have to now they're battling so much kind of energetic things and mental things, emotional things, that probably just would not even be there if they were more actively engaged in work.
Right.
If they were applying themselves to something, it would automatically cut out a big section of unnecessary things that try to bring down the seeker.
Mm-hmm.
So that is like a big point, I feel, that people should realize, is that it's a huge benefit to your sadhana, even just from that aspect. And you can still keep your, if you're into spiritual practices like chanting and meditating and studying, these type of practices, you can still do that. But now you kind of get sensitive to your own system, and like, okay, when is it time to now be applied and engaged into some active work? And you kind of feel that as the other side of the coin, where that actually supports your spiritual engagement of meditation, perhaps. And you do it in such a way where it doesn't allow these lower energies to come and assail you, and and you to start feeling lower energy, tamasic, and things like that. A little laziness will creep in if you let it. Tamas is just like any like inch you give it, it takes it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's okay, I have this now. Okay, I have it. Like it just creeps in. You have to. It's like an active rejection of it through work and through activity. You have to like constantly be pushing these things away to keep yourself clear, which is the sattva. So it's like you can't have the sattva truly unless you're really engaged in work, it seems. It seems like you may experience sattva, but to have it be permeating through your life in all situations, there's no way it's going to happen unless you have a healthy mindset of work and using work as a means for your own sadhana, I feel. So it prevents a fall. Is a fall in consciousness, I feel, work. And I'm sure we both experienced that many times. Like, you're feeling low, like, oh no, why am I feeling this low? It's just like it's kind of like, maybe you get a little worried or something, or like maybe some bad habits all of a sudden pop up again. And like, oh, where did this come from? I thought I was done with this.
Mm-hmm.
This is showing up now. Like, what the heck? But then you have like a day set up of like active work that you're doing, and if it's for a higher purpose, even better. That helps more, and it just kind of eradicates a lot of the energy around these certain things that you may have experienced, bad habits or bad thoughts or just low energy. The red dot's a good example because you may be, say if you're in the front, you also have to deal with a lot of customers.
People.
Yeah, and you can't be like in your own mind, like mulling about your bad situation. You have to just kind of fake that you're happy,
Right.
and actually the fake it till you make it kind of thing. Actually, that really is a real thing.
Absolutely,
it
is.
You fake something and it kind of imprints that idea in your system, and then you start to actually experience it. You actually are experiencing it.
If you're sincere, it becomes real in your system.
Yeah. So that's a good one. I remember when I was I'm feeling low, and then I'd have to teach a lesson to someone. I'd start the lesson feeling really low, and then I'd leave the lesson and I'd feel so like uplifted and high. And it's like, what did I even do? I just it was, and I think also what work is, and it ties into this, is you're giving yourself. So it's giving of oneself to someone else or something else, or some higher thing. It could be a higher cause, or the person in front of you, and it's you're losing your own worries and self-concern, your individual consciousness of your individual problem. It gets dissolved when you are just giving, basically, and that's the whole magic around giving, and work can absolutely be hand in hand with that process, I feel, of giving. And I think that's the way. It seems that's the way of real progress too. When your work becomes that like sacrament of giving, then it's like you can really just shed a lot of your unnecessary lower garbage, karmas, whatever you want to call it.
Look, just 1 second. You're a little bit off the screen.
Okay.
You might just want to move a little to the right. Or yes. Yeah, I think you said a lot of really powerful things there, and some things that I just wanted to respond to. I think that on so many of levels of what you said, it's true. For one, when you look at it just from like the individual way of avoiding tamas and staying in a sattvic state and staying in a balanced state, anybody, I think whether you're spiritual or not, they go through what's called churning. And spiritual people might be more familiar with the term. It's basically like when something gets activated in your system and you start going through some kind of a pain. Usually it's a deep emotional or mental pain because you're facing something that's difficult for you. At least that's been my experience. It could be, oh my God, I can't overcome this, or why do I have to go through this, or why do I feel this way about this, or why does this person feel that way about me? All of these things, and they're typically, in my experience at least, churning is very often based on lower emotions or lower thoughts. When you have work to do, and when there's pressure of work, that it's work that it matters to you, and like you were saying, if it's giving, more than likely it matters a lot to somebody else also. You're going to have a hard time staying in that lower emotion for too long because you have things to do. And if those things matter, if you can make those things matter more than yourself, you'll transcend that churning, you'll transcend these lower things into a higher part of your being. Because you'll feel in the heart that you need to live in that higher part in order to do what you need to do. And I know for me, that is really what has brought work full circle. Is like, man, I can't churn for long. I can't stay lower for long. I can't stay lazy for long. I've been given a charge to do things that are significant to somebody, and they're done out of service to the divine. How can I possibly be giving divine good service if I am thinking about how angry I am at Mukta because he didn't make my breakfast the way I like it? You know what I'm saying? Or whatever it is that you're churning about. Work pushes you to live in the higher parts of your being. Because, like you said, work very often it involves interfacing with the world. The quality of what you do is felt by whoever you're doing it for. You know, there's so many ways that, like, if you're a sincere seeker and you're sincerely doing sadhana and trying to either reach a state or manifest something or serve something, you can't do it very well if you're angry all the time, if you're judgmental all the time, if your mind is running and running and running and running. And it's not to say that through work you won't go through all of those feelings, but you, through determination, you can rise above them even when they come. And then, like you were saying in the example of like giving a lesson, through that lesson you're going to get into who you really are, not this veil that's just coming because you're overcoming your samskaras.
Right.
You know, and samskaras are basically they're past life karmas that you need to overcome. Work really helps you get to that. And I think it also in many ways, like, it grows your sincerity through working. Because, you know, I mean, whether it's for a teacher or for a purpose, or even if it's just like you have a mission that you think is really, really important. Like, let's just use, like Maiji, she uses Elon Musk all the time, and I think he's a great example. He's a man that, I have no idea if he's spiritual or not, but he's a man that wants to manifest really, really significant things that have a gigantic change on mankind. And I'm sure that in his days, he goes through massive challenges every single day. He's in the media. He's being attacked by so many people. There are people that say he's foolish. There are people that say that he's bogus. People say all these different kinds of things. And if he were to spend all of his day so angry about what everybody was writing about him, he wouldn't have a chance to be running Tesla and running SpaceX and creating these new companies and constantly coming up with and truly manifesting ideas that are for the betterment of mankind. So that's where, like, any work done with some sincerity to something I think maybe this is an important point. To me, any work done with the sincerity of something greater than yourself is sadhana. There's not actually any difference because it's for a greater good. And then, you know, I know for me, like, a really, really significant point of work, and I'm trying to think of how I put this into words, is that, like, I feel that through my work, I'm a representative of, let's just say, Maiji, or I'm a representative of Divine Shakti Mandir. So I might think, I don't care what anybody thinks of me, you know, it doesn't matter to me, but I certainly care what people think of my group. I certainly care what people think of my master. And as an extension of either of these things, my every action represents that group. So if I'm walking around with, like, a shirt untucked and a big belly hanging out and I didn't shave, and I'm going into a meeting as a member of Divine Shakti Mandir, or as a member of the Red Dot, or as a member of Dot Light Realty, or as a member of Divine Shakti Arts, you know, these things are what people will feel. They will feel like these companies are slovenly. These companies are tamasic. These companies are not representing the higher aspects in man. They're not representing divine aspects. Or I can even say, like, they're not representing my master.
Right.
They're not representing Maiji. Or, like, oh, this is who Maiji is? This is who Maiji has raised? And when I think about it in that way, it makes my heart hurt. That if I'm going out into the world and I'm making somebody think poorly of Maiji, I can't think of that's like a lie. You know, so I can't think of a more painful thing. So even if I'm going through all of these lower emotions and all of this churning that we're describing, I have to hold myself to a high standard because I'm representing so much more than myself.
Right.
I'm going out there as a representative of the divine. And I'm doing my spiritual process. Maybe I don't think that I'm fully divine myself, but regardless, I'm representing something that I believe is the epitome of divine. So I need to do my best to basically be vibrating at that level. And that being conscious of that really, really helps me like not allow myself to sink. No matter if depression will come, no matter if like a feeling of meaninglessness will come.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody in a spiritual path, you're going to go through
Yeah, absolutely.
all of these different things. But when they come, it's like you grasp onto that thing of that which you're representing.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, when that consciousness started becoming more solid in me, I feel like I can't allow myself to descend very low anymore. And yes, it's a lot of pressure. I mean, no doubt, I'm sure you feel it too. I feel pressure all the time. But I also feel such a greater dignity in my life. I feel that I carry myself so much better. I feel, and I don't think it's just me going through it. I think that absolutely, I've seen the same thing in you and in so many in the group, that there's a connection to something that through the love of the guru, you know that you're a representative of the guru. So you have to hold yourself at that level. Even if it's just a thought that maybe through working with me, somebody can experience 1% of my guru. And if that happens, then that's wonderful. But I certainly know that I don't want them to experience something that's opposite of what she represents. I certainly don't want to walk into a room and lose my temper and start yelling, no matter how bad the situation is. Because I'm representing her. And because I see divine in her, I'm representing that. And this applies whether you're spiritual or you're not spiritual. Even if you're going into a meeting, and let's say you're an environmentalist and you're going into a meeting with some oil companies and you're trying to change their mind about some new environmentally conscious way of obtaining oil. And how you hold yourself could have an impact on the whole movement. Mm-hmm. If you lose your cool because you think they're doing something wrong and because of that, you're just expressing anger and you're not reaching anybody's heart or mind, and you leave that meeting with everybody thinking, environmentalists are bogus, you're not acting in support of that which is greater than you, that which is your mission. Mm-hmm. So and then to do that in the highest way, you need to be able to connect to the whole atmosphere. And divine is wide in that way. It seeps into the whole atmosphere. So there's so many things that you can realize. I mean, I think to me they're the higher spiritual concepts through work.
Right. Yeah. I think that point that you're bringing up of churning basically, and it's bringing your lower things come up to the surface and to be experienced, and then it's in our process of work that when they come up, they can actually be dissolved. And so it's this process that you're speaking about of holding a higher ideal, and it's this ideal of something. And your example was being a representative of the guru or the master or of the divine. That's the ideal, and you don't want to do something that reflects the opposite of that.
Right.
And so even if you are churning, you have something that is more important still in the background. You don't let go of that, and so that's a tremendous, I think, spiritual practice, is to, in the midst of work, in the midst of things that you're going through, doubts, could be depression, could be like confusion, sensing that ideal that you're holding, and just kind of marching forward regardless of what you're experiencing, knowing that this is coming up, I'm here to experience this, I'm here to move through this, and it will pass, and I'm meant to burn through this.
Right.
And so I'm going to continue to work and hold this high ideal of this aspiration. If you're lucky and you have a teacher in physical form, then it could be to that form, that guru, that master. But it could even, I feel, be just to your own aspiration, and to your own ideal of yourself as the best version you could be. And just kind of marching when you've experienced something lower, you just keep marching. I think marching is the best example. I just love that, actually. It's really helped me in the past of going through something. I just picture marching's like that kind of thing where no matter what you're going through, you're a soldier. You may have like gone through hell. You may be going through hell, but you still have this formation, and you're still moving in time,
right?
And you're keeping that pace regardless of what's happening, and it kind of like moves you through all this stuff. I think at a quicker pace. Doesn't let you get caught into like now you're wallowing in something.
Exactly.
So you're not wallowing, you're just marching, and you're experiencing. Yeah, you're going through pain. There may be suffering, but you're marching. And it's just kind of cuts out the room for wallowing and further confusion and contemplating on your own confusion and making it worse.
I think you find yourself contemplating more on higher things. I mean, that's I think what a big, I don't know if you've noticed this shift, but I know that a big shift that I've felt in myself is that the more that my consciousness has become focused on work rather than what I'm going through personally, I do find that when I am contemplating about things, it's much less about a judgment of this or an anger of that or I didn't get this, and it's more so like, this is a higher ideal, this is a new way of realizing it, or even like, this is something I've been trying, this is like that was a situation where I wasn't 100% truthful. I wonder what I could have done to be more truthful in that scenario. And not in this thing of like the word you used is perfect, not in like a way of wallowing of like, oh my God, I was so untruthful in that situation and it was the worst, but just like, I'm going to be back in the field again tomorrow and I'm going to be faced with a very similar situation. How can I be more truthful the next time that comes up?
Right.
How can I reject whatever it is that made me take that shortcut or say what I said or want to avoid the consequences of that? And just like through that, it's just like work and life, they're just teachers. It's just like constantly teaching and teaching and teaching you. And actually, Maiji sent this a beautiful quote today. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something along the lines of, it was written by a master. You might remember who it was.
Swami Vivekananda.
Yes.
Yeah.
Something along the lines of, as long as you're sincere, I'll correct your mistakes 1,000 times. So if you're sincere, you could see it as a master, you could see it as Prakriti, which is nature, or you can just see it as the world. They're going to keep giving you opportunities to overcome something that's not truthful in yourself. And I think work just constantly puts us in those scenarios. And I think that it's pressure, which we haven't gone so much into today, and maybe that's a topic for another time because I could spend a whole another hour and a half talking about pressure. But when there's pressure there, the impact of your decisions, it's almost like it's tripled. You know, how one performs under pressure. It's truly where you get, I think it's where you get to see who you are. It's the best barometer, not who you are. That's not a good way of putting it. You get to see where you are in that moment.
Yeah. What is honestly in you. Yeah. That you may have a huge depth to you, very beautiful, but it definitely shows you what at least operates in you, what you allow to operate in you.
Can you express it when the moment? Can you express your highest nature in the critical moment?
Yeah.
And for each person, that critical moment shows itself in so many different scenarios, and it depends on your nature, and it depends on your profession, and it just. But there's no person that doesn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
That you're gonna come to. There will be a conversation that you won't forget where you said the right thing or you said the wrong thing. And either way, you're not going to forget it, and life is going to keep putting those situations in front of you. So you could see them as life, or you can see them as work, or you can view them as whatever they are. But to me, if you want to talk about any spiritual attainment, this is my opinion, is the only test for spiritual attainment is in a moment of pressure. There's no other test. Maiji, or it might have been Bhagavan, Swami Sri Atmananda, one of them shared a story where there was a master who sat in a cave it was something like this. He sat in a cave and he achieved samadhi, and he was there for like 20 years, just sitting in a cave, and felt himself as this very, very high being who had realized God and couldn't be shaken from that state. So one day he gets up and he walks down for the cave, and he walks into the village, and within 5 minutes, anger, lust, greed, his entire system is overrun by lower emotions, and he's completely lost his state. How can somebody with 20 minutes in samadhi lose the state so quickly? Because that's
20 years?
20 years, yeah. Because the state's never been put under pressure.
Right.
The state's never been tested.
Yeah.
And for the state to be spread and realized, it has to go through that pressure.
Yeah. Hasn't integrated into life.
Right. It just lives somewhere up here.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, like Sri Aurobindo in the Mother's Path, is how to merge spirit with matter. So if you don't have the matter part down, you can't bring the spirit down.
Mm-hmm.
But you also can't just be in matter. And again, that might be a topic. We're speaking a lot about matter. But I think that we're speaking about its significance in the spiritual context.
Right. Yeah. And I think a couple more things we could just bring up. I think we covered a lot here so far already. Is one thing that I appreciate about work, and especially work in the context of sadhana and spiritual manifestation, is that when you're working, it actually teaches you a lot about spiritual manifestation and how it works.
Right.
Like how, when something will flow,
Mm-hmm.
when it won't flow, and when it really is like a perfect mirror, and I feel like when you're manifesting spirit, it all has to do with the quality of your intention and your heart behind something. And when you do something with heart and sincerity and proper intention, you see it magnify in someone else, and then that will spread and uplift someone else that you have no contact with at all. And to see these things happen, it teaches you a lot, about spiritual manifestation. And it also it teaches you the opposite of when it cuts everything off. Like if you allow yourself to fall low for whatever reason, there's a lot of times where you can actually see it now reflect in some sort of manifestation within one of the spiritual companies. Something will happen where it didn't really fulfill itself, or didn't work out, or someone will get angry somewhere. And I always look at things like that like a reflection. So yeah, it's I think that's the end goal for beings, or maybe not the end goal, but a pretty significant goal is to manifest their consciousness in the earth and manifest their spirituality, and to be working while you're doing your sadhana, your spiritual practice. It gives you a taste of how these things work. It shows you it gives you clues, like if you are to one day bring about a big change on the earth through creating something that's meaningful, you'll have a base of experience because you've been doing that already to some extent. You've been working and you've seen what things go wrong and why things go good and what led up to those good things happening. And so you get this real nice base of experience where when it's time to release something beautiful out of your heart, into the earth, you'll know the ins and outs of it a bit. You know how to do it. You'll know the proper way to spread your heart, your love, and your work, your intelligence. It'll give you some clues, and I think that's one of the other great benefits of including work in your spiritual practice.
Absolutely.
So, I think we could stop. I think we could stop here, unless you have anything else to say regarding this topic.
No, I mean, it's something you can go on for a long time about.
Yeah, I'm sure we can bring this up again.
Absolutely, and I think that even just things that could be discussed in the future, just we can say it out loud here. I think that we didn't go too much into the importance of developing skill in your work.
Oh yes,
which I think also it's a very practical concept, but it's a spiritual concept as well.
Yeah.
Mahasaraswati,
right.
Aspect of perfection and order. And you see, I mean, you can even through work, you can compare that to all of the mother's different spiritual aspects. But I do want to in the future touch more on pressure.
Yeah.
Which I think that is, there's pressure for everybody. I do think there's different levels of pressure in different types of work. And I think that it's really an important thing to talk about because I do believe, and certainly in my own experience, and I can definitely imagine in yours, pressure has been the fastest transformative force for me. The pressure of needing to do something well and needing to learn it quickly, and what happens when you fail at it, and what you go through when you fail at it because you messed up, basically.
Yeah.
And how you take that. It's all such powerful life experiences.
Yeah.
I think it's too long for this talk, but like some of the most powerful experiences that like sit in my body and sit in my bones were times that I failed.
Right.
And when I say failed, I'm saying things didn't happen the way I wanted them to happen. Or the way that Maiji or somebody had asked me to make them happen.
Yeah.
A goal was set and it didn't realize itself. And I know I'd love to touch more on like how do you deal with it when you know that was your fault.
Yeah.
Because there was something
That's
within
a really
you
good thing,
that you couldn't overcome in that scenario. And I know that I personally have had some really, really powerful examples of that. And some of the worst pain I ever went through was from that, but it forced me to take really, really honest look at myself and what I needed to transform, and not just transform, but things that I needed to let go in my own ego and in my own way of interacting, and how important it was to be right and how to create harmony and situate. There's such a depth to this.
Right.
But I would love to have another talk really focused on the pressure of work.
Sure.
And the transformative force of that.
Yeah.
And about, if we even want to bring it to a spiritual concept, there are concepts of attachment to the process and attachment to the result, and how those play into work, and what that means.
It just goes on and on. But yeah, it's those things are very important. I'm glad you. We could just kind of like briefly just, wrap up with those
Sure.
concepts. And you mentioned like skill, and yeah, I think you know that's a big thing that I find with work is that it expands your capacity, and it's and that's pressure also expands your capacity. They kind of pressure and work, they kind of
Mm.
they go hand in hand, and the expanding your capacity also, it's kind of like spirit then gets to flow into these avenues that you now have uh, achieved. You've achieved a higher level of skill, so then now now your spiritual inclinations, your goodwill, your love, your intention towards a higher humanity can now be executed through this greater level of skill that you've achieved, and that's huge, I think, for manifesting.
Absolutely.
We need to be achieving greater and greater skill to perfect our earthly existence.
Right.
I think for everyone,
Right.
and it's so important. And then you mentioned the attachment process. Like that's like it's actually a good thing to mention, and maybe we should just kind of briefly touch
Sure.
on that.
Sure.
And so it's like learning how to work without your personal interest, like we were talking about before, working where you're serving something greater. Now when you stop serving something greater, you start serving yourself, and then you this is when attachment, I think, has opportunity, and you start to what you do, you start to subtly, it could be it could be aiding to your identity and your sense of self-importance, like, oh, I'm the person who does this great now,
Right.
it instead of like offering that up further, like, thank you for like allowing my system to expand so I can serve more. It's more like, oh, I'm the guy that has achieved this, and everyone should realize that, or like
You are replaceable.
I should be recognized. Yeah, yeah, and I'm not replaceable now. That's the thing. So these are the situations that have an opportunity to pollute your system and kind of like put little brakes on your progress. And so it's kind of like the check. You have to keep yourself in check when you're working, and attachment. So you mentioned the three things. It was attachment to the result, attachment to the process. What was the other one they said?
Well, I mentioned those as
Yeah.
spiritual concepts, but then I was more just talking about transformation through pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. So and the pressure thing, I think you spelt it out there pretty good already, and we definitely could talk about that more with like the various examples that we've gone through. But yeah, I think in general it's just to welcome pressure and use it as an opportunity to expand your capacity, and then also hone and strengthen your sincerity.
Right. Pressure, I think, is like fuel for the system in a way. I mean, human nature without pressure, somebody is more likely to remain the same. And whether you want to look at that spiritually or materially, if you're trying to reach your highest state, let's say we look at it spiritually, or you're trying to reach the highest state of God or the highest realization, if you don't have pressure to transform, it's a very rare being that comes with a aspiration so intense that it doesn't need pressure to push it to the next level. And I mean, even you read stories of spiritual masters, and we know the stories of our own spiritual masters, such high beings were put under the most intense pressure to transform.
Right.
Because to reach the highest state, you really need something pushing you. And I mean, I don't know, part of it is the reason I always just feel such gratitude to the world for organizing that I wound up here, was that there is no way I was going to become anything worth anything if I didn't have somebody constantly putting pressure on me. To the end goal of that, of course, is to learn how to keep pressure on yourself. But especially in the beginning, you really need pressure. You need either somebody to put pressure or there's pressure on you through work. You know, and you could give a million different examples in any industry of where, like, did you respond to the pressure? Did you fold under the pressure?
Right. And I think, one could think they're under pressure, or they're putting pressure on themselves. Like, I have such a high aspiration and I want to do these things. You don't actually realize that you've created a very comfortable box for yourself where you're under pressure under your own terms when you want. And so it's and I saw that myself, like right when that's what I was. That's kind of how I was. I had a lot of aspiration and I'd put pressure on myself, but of course it was under my own terms.
Right.
And I didn't realize that it was still in a land of relatively comfortable situation.
Yeah.
It was not until that some outside force comes that it really shakes you, and it really kind of knocks you out of it wakes you up, and it's kind of indispensable. And
I think real pressure helps you see something closer to an ultimate truth, like things that are what's the word I'm looking for? They're truths that you can't deny. They're not subjective truths. They're actual truths. And I think through pressure and then also through humility, because you need to be humble enough to see that I created this little bubble and I hope I can, if it's okay that I go a little bit more into this since we've kind of gone down this topic. I mean, I know that when I first came to the group, just to sort of give an example of having that bubble burst, I was finishing my master's in business, and there was there was a lot of talk among different group members, and that was even said to me of oh, great, we have somebody with a business background. Daniel's coming. He's going to know how to help us grow all our businesses and improve all our businesses. And of course, I'm strutting along. I'm just yes, I'm going to really be able to help transform this group, and I'm ready for this, and blah, 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 without having the humility in myself to be like, Daniel, have you ever run a business before? Have you ever been part of a spiritual organization? Have you ever even truly been an entrepreneur? In so many different contexts. And I mean, within a month of moving here, I mean, that whole idea was just torn to pieces. And it was brutal in a lot of senses, but it was absolutely necessary for me to get to some truth about both my capacity, but also where I was in the moment. And I mean, where I was in the moment was I didn't know how to do anything.
Yeah. It's you need to be able to honestly assess yourself, and if you have this big idea or fantasy structure around you, you can't even access yourself.
And it was a fantasy. It was all a fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you learned a lot, but you didn't have the experience yet. Yeah.
Well, I learned. I mean, what I learned educationally was, I think it comes down to pressure. That did teach me to handle some degree of pressure. There's deadlines.
Yeah.
There's a necessity to apply your intelligence. If you don't apply your intelligence and effort, you're going to fail.
Right.
And you're not going to get your degree. But that's a whole nother thing from running a business or guiding somebody else to run a business or telling somebody these are the financial decisions you should make. And then somebody basing possibly their largest life decisions on what you say when you're in a consulting role.
Yeah.
And to take that to heart, and then like, whoa, because that, that really started hitting me, is just like, there's even coming back to that thing of what you represent. I represented somebody with an MBA, right? So somebody with an MBA is supposed to have a certain kind of standing. So especially when you talk to small business owners, there were people that just took me at my word. That is a scary responsibility when you don't have experience. So from that, that really forced me to get into truth. When being in the group opened my eyes abruptly about how little I knew, then, I think now we're connecting more and more things. Then came the thing of like, well, you better develop some darn skills.
Yeah.
If you have intelligence but no skill, your intelligence doesn't mean anything. So you better get some skills and you have to start from the ground up. You can't, I can't all of a sudden, somebody with some intelligence and no talent, okay, go run my Fortune 500 company. No, I don't even know how to run so you have to like build yourself up and allow yourself to be molded in a humble way. And you have to, I really think that you, and this is a whole different concept, but I do feel to bring it up, I think that you need to go through pains of reality. You need to go through pains of failure. You need to go through the pain that comes with like, I thought I was this way and I'm not, which is probably the biggest pain.
Yeah.
Of just thinking, most people, they have a conception of themselves that they build their realities on.
Absolutely.
And it takes a lot of courage to look at that and be like, I thought that I was this. This was my identity, and it's not.
Yeah.
I'm not manifesting that in any way. And if that's something that's important to me, I need to make some really significant changes to reach that. And I just think that like there's so much of this wisdom that we're speaking of, you really develop it in so many ways through work as your sadhana, because you have to interact with the world in so many different ways through work. And I think it's a lot different than how you interact with the world through maybe a more traditional spiritual path, where you can, I hate to say it, but you can hide behind a book. You can hide behind philosophy. When you're interacting with Prakriti, when you're interacting with the world, let's see how those philosophies hold up under pressure.
To lie to yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And through work, if you're sincere and you really want to see how you're manifesting, it gets a lot harder to lie to yourself. And you want it to be harder.
Yeah, it's actually perfectly set up. Yeah.
And then when one is really sincere in their work, they'll go through the pain of seeing the untruthfulness in their system. And yes, it's painful, but it's so beautiful. Because if you can allow that pain to grind you out, it's going to grind you into a more loving person. It's going to grind you into a more truthful person. It's going to grind you into a person that can hopefully carry a little bit more of divine in your heart and in your actions.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Mukta.
Yeah, to be continued. I think we'll do perhaps a series of these.
I think it would be great. We can kind of touch on, and I think that the way that this talk kind of unfolded has really led us into like, I hope that whoever's listening or watching can see that this idea of work is so, it almost encompasses everything.
Yeah, it's a very, very broad topic, and it's very interwoven with one's spiritual development.
Yes.
And it really goes hand in hand. It's not some outside topic of work, but it's integrated in life. Right. And it's in a way we can replace work with life, like you said earlier, I think. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us on this conversation, and it's been a joy. Much love.
Thank you.